I studied mediumship, wanting to understand the process a little more, wanting to understand what I was receiving, never expecting to actually say, I'm a medium. Okay, I want you to hear that. I did not study mediumship thinking that, oh, one day I'm gonna like put a shingle out and say I'm a medium, and here I am doing that. I did not expect that. But the healing that comes from that connection cannot be denied. And so I couldn't help but do that. So I did want to share with you that journey, that experience, and I would love to hear your questions. Welcome to the Light the Day podcast, where we explore spiritually transformative experiences. I'm your host, Julie Cluff, and today I have a special episode for you. Today, I want to share with you a little bit about the journey to mediumship, what that means for you, how you experience your own mediumship, how I've experienced mediumship, how I went from being someone who didn't even really interact with mediumship at all to now doing mediumship readings, which if you had told me, I actually had an appointment with a client, I think that was just yesterday, and she said, 2 years ago, if you'd said it was her first mediumship reading ever, and she said, if you had told me 2 years ago that I would be meeting with a medium, I would have thought you were crazy. And I said, I laughed. I said, if you'd told me 2 years ago that I would be the medium that you're meeting with, I would have laughed. So, yeah, I just want to explore that a little bit. I actually had something completely different in mind to share with you today, and maybe I'll share that in the future. Some insights into where we're headed in 2026, where we're headed moving forward as humans on this planet, and how the world is shifting and changing. We're all seeing it and feeling it. We certainly saw that big shift that happened in 2020, and that moved our trajectory a little bit. But yeah, I was going to talk about that, and then as I was putting my notes together, I thought, no, I need to talk about mediumship. So that's what we're going to talk about today. You probably already know my story. You know that I lost my brother to suicide many years ago. And then in 2007, my two youngest children passed away in a rollover car accident that we were in. And that journey of learning to connect with them on the other side to, my spiritual experiences that are connected to the passing of my children specifically, that was extremely healing to me. That was the biggest piece that helped me heal, was the spiritual connection to them, the spiritual connection to the other side. Um, Maybe I'll take it on another episode. I'll talk about the connection to the angels. That's a whole different journey, but connecting the spiritual connection to my angels, to my guides, to the people I love who are on the other side was extremely healing for me, and was a big, big, big part of my healing my grieving heart. Then, as I became a grief coach, if you know some of my background, several years ago, I began training in the field of grief, and I began working with people. I developed a grief healing program with it was called a very specific model called the um, Hope model of healing. And that had, five very specific um, points to it. But again, I kept going back to like that spiritual connection was a big, big, big piece of my healing. And then as I began coaching people, I became more and more connected to my own intuition and to those that subtle energy, the subtle shifts in energy, the subtle downloads that we receive either through our spiritual senses. Like we have physical senses, touch, seeing, hearing, but we also have spiritual senses that mirror our physical senses. So sometimes, like the sense of seeing is called clairvoyance or clear seeing. That's seeing things with our mind's eye. And sometimes we see things with our eyes that then spark our clairvoyance or spark an inner knowing that what we're seeing in our sight has more meaning than just seeing. I'll give you a quick example. This morning, as I was sitting, I sat down on the edge of my bed to put my shoes on. And I looked out the window that was right in front of me, and there was a cardinal right there on the branch, just right in front of my window. Never seen that before. And that cardinal just sat there for a moment, and that felt significant. So then looking at the meaning, the spiritual meaning of a cardinal, and that what happened this morning continued as I went to the back porch, opened the back door. All these cardinals filled the branches in front of my porch. I don't know that I've ever seen the birds come that closely to, there was actually a cardinal sitting on the back porch, like on the deck. So yeah, just interesting things like that. So an example of clairvoyance is being able to see things in your mind's eye, being shown a picture, being shown an example of something that's clairvoyant. So we have also spiritual hearing where we hear words. Maybe you've heard my story before where I heard words in my ear. It was that said, bring my arm in while I was in that rollover accident, and that saved my arm. Um, and then clairsentience. So clairvoyant is hear seeing, clairaudience is hearing, clairsentience is feeling, and it's that spiritual feeling. It's the subtleties when our energy shifts, when we feel something that wasn't there a moment ago, and it feels like a message. All right. So I don't want to give you a whole class on that. I actually have a course on my website called Spirit Communication, which goes into more detail on all of this and how you can make that connection with your guides and your angels and so forth. But as I was coaching people, a lot of times the people I was coaching had lost a loved one. And so many times I would feel their loved one in the room with us. Sometimes I would hear messages from their loved ones. I would sense that they were there with us. The example I use a lot because it was so clear was a mom who had lost her son to suicide, and she was talking about how guilty she felt and how, like she just felt so badly that this happened and felt responsible. And I'm over here because I heard it here. Like this is a lot of times where I receive from. But I heard her son. I mean, I just felt him in the room, and I heard him saying that I don't want her to feel guilty. It's she has no reason to feel guilty. But it was things like that that would happen, but I didn't know how to communicate that to the person that I was meeting with. I didn't want to say, "Hey, your son's here, your daughter's here, your mom's here." I didn't know how to communicate that. I felt it, I sensed it, and a lot of times the information that they were giving me was hints on was clues to how I could help the person that was sitting up across from me, which was wonderful. So it was very co-creative. Like I was coaching them, they had no idea that their loved one was in the room coaching me to coach them. So it began like that. And then I had an experience, and maybe you've heard me talk about this before, but I had an experience where in 2020, a friend of mine, her son had passed away, and I was out running errands, like totally unexpected, not expecting anything at all, not even, it was just completely unexpected. And I got in my car, and when I got in my car, I felt her son in the car with me. It was that feeling, that spiritual feeling that he was there and that he had a message. And I wasn't, I just sensed him there, and I sensed that he had a message, but I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. So I did the only thing that I could think to do, and I pulled out my phone and I just started to write in my phone what I was sensing and hearing from her son. And eventually I delivered that message to her, in a very clunky way, I'm sure, because I was like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what's happening here. But I do feel like, our loved ones on the other side, they want to communicate with us. They are communicating with us. They're commu my brother was communicating long before I realized he was communicating with me. My belief now is that they're always with us, and that they can communicate with us at any time. And a lot of times the good ideas that we have that we think that are our own ideas are a lot of times they're coming from our loved ones, our spirit guides, and our angels on the other side that are whispering in our ear, giving us good information. Probably why I'm talking about mediumship today, because there's probably a messenger that was whispering my ear saying, yeah, this is the message for today. So that's what I'm talking about. Um, but I felt this, and I felt this connection, and I didn't share this with a lot of people. Obviously, I didn't go around saying, "Hey, look what, listen to what happened." But I did share it with a very intuitive friend that I'd been working with for a while. And I said, okay, so this happened and I had this experience. And she said, well, what if you like, there's a reason that you're experiencing this. What if you leaned into it a little bit? And so with her advice, and I actually had shared it with somebody earlier, what happened with this friend's son a year or so earlier than this. And he asked me, he says, well, what did it feel like? And I paused. I remember pausing and just reflecting on what that felt like when I had that communication from my friend's son. And the answer was sacred. It felt very, very sacred. There was no scariness to it. It was not, um, it felt sacred. It felt, yeah, that's the best word I have for it. So then this other friend, that I was sharing this with, said, what if you leaned into it a little bit? So with her advice, I decided to lean into it a little bit. And I just sat at my desk, and I just allowed to sense and feel and hear whoever might be there. Just like, okay, who's here? Who wants to communicate with me? And I received two messages. I'm going to share one specifically with you. But both of these messages were from loved ones of previous clients that I hadn't worked with for a long time. Um, and one of them I'm going to share with you real quick, and it was a dad. It was a dad of I had worked with his daughter not long after he had passed away. We probably started working together maybe a year after he passed away. And he's just his daughter loved him so much, and he was, that she was really struggling with his loss, as you can imagine. And she was a young woman, and her dad meant a lot to her, had, was very, very close to her. Well, it makes sense. If our loved ones are close to us here, they're going to continue to be close to us on the other side. We have created a bond here, which reminds me of a reading I did yesterday, which maybe I'll have a chance to share with you in a moment. But I just want to kind of share with you this journey. A lot of times when we lose someone that's close to us, we we either, because of, religious conditioning or because of societal conditioning, we just feel like they're gone. I had a couple, actually several people in a grief webinar that I did that they were told by their therapist to just, that their husband was gone and they just need to accept it and he was gone, and to, just, it basically it was over. And that feels really harsh. And I know that that's the thinking for some people, and it's okay. Like, I'm not discounting anybody's belief systems. I truly think it's okay that we believe what we believe. But as this father communicated with me, I don't even remember what the rest of the message was, but I remember at the end of this message, he said, when you get married and when you have children, I'll be there. Well, I I argued with him. I'm kind of embarrassed to say, but I was just like, I don't think I can share that message, like, it just, because she was a single woman, and I didn't know that she even wanted to get married or have children. I think, I knew that she had been hurt by men in the past, and was maybe not feeling really comfortable being in a relationship. And it just felt presumptuous to me to share a message with her that her dad says, when you get married, I'll be there. For whatever reason, I felt uncomfortable with that. That's what I'm sharing. And but I did reach out to her and I said, well, let me finish what I was saying there. The message was so strong that I needed to share that part of the communication with her. It was so strong that I couldn't not share that. So I did reach out to her. She agreed to hear the message. I sent the message to her, and she thanked me so much. This was a couple of years ago. And I don't even remember how long ago it was now, 2 or 3 years ago. I do remember it was around Christmas time, so it was over 2 years ago. It might have been the Christmas before that even. Um, and I sent the message to her. She was super grateful for the message, and we, shared this communication. And like I said, I hadn't talked to her in months, and I didn't expect to hear from her again. Well, 2 months after I sent her that message, a mutual friend posted a picture of her wedding. So when I sent that message to her, she was engaged. I had no idea. I had no idea before I sent the message or even after I sent the message that she was engaged to get married. But sure enough, this picture came across my screen of her getting married out of the blue. I was just amazed. And to me, that was confirmation that that was her dad, and that's why he was so emphatic that I shared that message with her. Excuse me. Um, so that was kind of my little leap into, let me just see. Let me just see. So from that point, I decided to explore mediumship. I decided to take a class. I thought, I'm just going to take a class, just see what I can learn about this. Because if people are showing up and I'm feeling them in the room and they're wanting, and I was also having some other experiences I won't go into right now, but where I was doing angel readings for people, and their loved ones would show up. And I was actually sharing with them that their loved ones will show up. Actually, let me share one experience that I had with that. I was doing a reading for a man who had lost his son to suicide. Interestingly, I had a kind of I've had a few people that I've worked with that's been the case. And it had been fairly recent, and he had been feeling his son around him, but then dismissing it, discounting it, doubting it. And when I was doing this angel reading for this man, his son came in and shared that it was actually him communicating with his son. And he showed me in my mind's eye that his dad was in a cloud of grief. The heaviness of grief. Grief is hard. He was in a cloud of grief, and that every once in a while that cloud would part and his son would be able to communicate with him. And then then after his son communicated with him, the cloud would cover, the cloud of grief would cover him again. That weight, that heaviness would cover him again. And it was when that cloud of grief came back that disconnection happened, and his dad then would start to doubt the communication. So his son came in to tell his dad, yes, that was me, and this is what's happening. This is why you're having this communication and then doubting it, and having it and then doubting it. So that was one of my first mediumship experiences with the client. Then I started studying mediumship. I started learning about evidential mediumship and how to feel more confident sharing the not just the messages, but sharing the evidence that I was receiving. Um, for example, I was doing a reading for someone, and all of a sudden there was like this mom. I knew it was the mom, and this person I was reading for knew it was her mom. And I said, why does she have all this fruit around her? Like, I just see her surrounded by fruit, and I didn't have context for it. I just was like, there's just all this fruit around her. And her daughter said, oh, she loved canning. And when her daughter said that, then her mom came in and gave us so much evidence that she was sharing about her canning and how she liked to work, and how she liked to that her daughter, the daughter that I was reading for, that her daughter would help her, but her mom really liked to do it on her own. Anyway, there was a lot of really clear messages in and evidence in what her mom, these memories that her mom was bringing back. Her mom was sharing all these memories, and her daughter was confirming, yes, yes, that's what I experienced. That's the way I experienced my mom. That was her personality. Those were the things that she enjoyed. This is the way so there was just so much evidence. Um, there was I was thinking of another one that when I shared that I wanted to share with you, but maybe it'll come back up again. But it's so fascinating. I was doing a reading for another woman, and her dad came through, and he brought us back to a memory when she was a child. And I want to share a little bit of about what that's like from my perspective as a medium, because I don't have the whole picture. I'm getting these clues like the fruit. And I'm saying to the daughter, like, why is she surrounded by fruit? Like, it didn't make sense to me. And then the daughter's like, oh, she loved to can. And then all of a sudden, then the mom starts showing me more memories of the canning and more experiences with the canning that her daughter was able to to verify. Then this and this other reading, this dad was brought me to this memory of her, the person I was reading for, of her when she was a child and how they would go out to this cabin. And I actually like saw, felt, and heard his boots on the crunchy snow. It was like I saw his boots going through the snow, and I heard the crunch of the snow, and I saw him gathering wood. It was just like he was bringing her back to this memory of, this memory that was such a happy memory for him, and how much he loved being with his family and being with her and being with her sisters, and how what a joyful memory that was. But he was also sharing how distracted generally he was by his work, and a lot of times he was disconnected from them. So it just gave so much confirmation to this daughter and so much understanding to this daughter. Um, I, I studied mediumship, wanting to understand the process a little more, wanting to understand what I was receiving, never expecting to actually say, I'm a medium. Okay, I want you to hear that. I did not study mediumship thinking that, oh, one day I'm gonna like put a shingle out and say I'm a medium, and here I am doing that. I did not expect that. But the healing that comes from that connection cannot be denied. And so I couldn't help but do that. So I did want to share with you that journey, that experience, and how it and I would love to hear your questions. If you get the email about this episode and you watch it, or you're in YouTube watching it, or you want to email me at julie@juliecluff.com and tell me, what your questions are about mediumship, I am happy to answer them. Like I said, I was doing that reading for the woman yesterday, like I said, and she was saying, I never thought I would be meeting with a medium. And I was like, I never thought that I would be the medium you were meeting with. 100% never thought that. Um, One of the first readings I did for someone after I went public and said, hey, this is what I do, was a woman who had lost her husband. She was widowed, and he came through with some beautiful evidence. I was able to describe what he looked like, his personality, how they worked together, how, what their relationship was like, and so forth. And then in the middle of the reading, just suddenly, like I was saying it before I was even realized I was saying it, but he said, and I shared with her, he said, well, how do you think you sold the house? And it just came through just like that. And she, in that moment, just went, oh my goodness, it was so crazy the way my house sold. And she started just, and that was his way of verifying to her, as I had no idea that the selling of her house was miraculous or whatever, but he did, and he knew that he had helped, and he wanted her to know that he had helped. And so he brought that message through. How do you think you sold your house? And she just, in that moment, she felt so loved, so supported. Um, she recognized that those, how he was still helping her from the other side. Um, just a couple more that I want to share with you. One that happened early on in when I was doing my training. I was meeting with a woman. I'd never met her before, and I was bringing through this. I I saw her. It was interesting because it was almost like a picture. I saw this person that I was meeting with, and I saw this other woman, and it was almost like I was looking at a picture of the two of them, and I saw them with their arms around each other, and I also saw that they resembled each other like really closely. And And I said to her, I said, okay, so I'm seeing this woman, and you guys resemble each other a lot. And it feels like there's a family relationship, but it doesn't. And there was so, and I said, you guys didn't live close to each other, but you loved getting together. When you would get together, you would go boating together. Like there was so much evidence. She showed me these sandals, and she said that there were some sandals that were important, and the person I was reading for said, yeah, I admired her sandals and she gave them to me. It turned out this woman was her sister-in-law, but they were um, often people would think they were sisters because they looked so much alike, but they were like best friends. They were sister-in-laws that were best friends. And she showed me this jewelry, again, the boating, and there was just a lot of evidence. And this woman was like, yes, yes, yes. But here was the surprise. Here was the surprise. When I got done, she said that what you shared was just exactly described my sister-in-law. But my sister-in-law is on hospice. She hasn't passed away. And we kind of sat there for a moment with that and thought, well, maybe she was communicating spirit to spirit, even though she hadn't passed away. Well, later that day, I got a message from this woman who said that her sister-in-law had died overnight, and she had gotten the message after we met. And that was just phenomenal. Often it doesn't happen that way. Often people don't come through that clearly, that soon, that quickly. They need time to adjust to the other side. They need time to learn how to communicate with us here, just like we're learning how to communicate with them there. But that was remarkable. That was a remarkable experience. Um, there're just so many. There's another experience where I had with a woman whose mother came through. And in the reading, it was an interesting thing because the mom was showing me. So we had already established that this was her mom because, I was able to describe what she looked like and some of her personality and some different things that it was very clearly this daughter, very clearly knew that this was her mom. And then in the process, she was I received that this woman had been really ill before she passed, and she was showing me. So the woman I was reading for, we'll call her the sitter. That's what it's often called in mediumship circles, is the sitter. The sitter confirmed that her mom had been ill, that she hadn't died suddenly. She had been ill for some time, and and then the mom was sharing with me on the other side how her transition, and this was the example that she gave, that her transition was much like a kindergartner visiting a classroom before they start going to school. So it was implied that the mom was visiting heaven like a kindergartner would go to, meet the teacher day and go and visit the classroom and go and meet the teacher before they actually started school. And that's the way this mom described her transition, that she was actually when she was ill and she was in these, how when people are terminally ill, they go in and out of consciousness. And when she was going in out of consciousness, she was having her own visit with heaven, with people on the other side, until she, made her final transition. The interesting thing about this one too is that the way that this mom shared this kindergarten story, I said to the daughter, I feel like she had a connection to the classroom. Would you understand that she was a teacher or she was connected to schools? And she said, yes, she was a teacher for 30 years. And so then her mom shared more about her career and her experiences as a teacher. So it was cool the way the mom used that example of, the kid visiting the classroom before they started attending, and also that was part of her career as well. So many cool ways that they get across their messages and their information. Um, the Trying to see if there were other things that I wanted to share with you. Um, I had a really fun reading. I mentioned it briefly a second ago, but I had a really fun reading with a woman yesterday whose good friend came through. And it was just so fun because this friend, like I could just feel their connection and how they interacted with each other. And she came through with so much evidence about their relationship and their interaction and the way that um, they were in life. Anyway, all this to say that if you're if you're wanting to experiment with a reading with a mediumship, do it. You know, do it as an experiment. Go to someone you feel comfortable with, whether it's me or someone else. If you're wanting to connect with someone on the other side, I want you to hear how my connection with the other side, my story, it happens faster for some people and not, it happens differently for everyone, but it took years. My kids passed away in 2007, and I just started, officially, professionally working as a medium last year. So it can be a slow development. And and even if you have a connection with the other side, doesn't mean you're going to be a medium. I never thought that that's what I would be doing for sure. But there's a few things I want you to, just from my perspective, again, take what resonates with you, leave behind what doesn't. But from my perspective in working in this and communicating with the other side, they want us to know that they're always here. Time and space is just so different on the other side. So they want us to know that they're always here for us, but they're also wanting us to live our human lives. So they're not interrupting us all the time or wanting us to connect with them continuously. That there's no um, there's no demands from the other side that we be continuously communicating with them, but they also want to be helpful, and they want to, we can acknowledge their presence when we feel them in the room. We can acknowledge them when we sense that they might have helped with something. If you feel like you remember your grandma, when you're uh, cooking in the kitchen, and you remember what your grandma always said about, how to measure something or whatever, you can you can speak to her in that moment and say, "Thanks, Grandma. Thanks for reminding me." Or you can say, "I don't know if you helped with this, but thank you if you did." Right? So they want you to know that they're always here for you. They love you. They care about you. Their perspective from the other side is very different. So many times when I'm doing a reading, people will bring forward how they lived their life here and and what their new perspective is from the other side. Again, you take what resonates and leave behind what doesn't. But I hope that you enjoyed this today, just sharing just these little snippets of my own development, my own experiences with doing this work, and how much healing comes from connecting to the other side. And a reminder that in the show notes there is a link to the a little guide on connecting with the angels. So have a blessed day. Thank you for listening to my story today, and I hope that it was helpful to you. Bye.